How do I want to say what?
What we gotta say?
What?
Love
What?
and
Uh-huh. What?
lifestyle.
That sounds about right.
So a couple months into our marriage, we started our first business together. So remember, we have a new marriage and we have a gasp new business with our struggling but getting better communication styles.
Yeah.
Our new business was Walking on Water Productions. Howard used to do videography services for weddings and music videos and whatever basically people would ask him to do. I was the administrator to help him bring along his vision. And I mean, as in like paperwork and business cards and just whatever I could do to help, because that
Finances,
wasn't finance, whatever I could do to help, because I didn't know anything about videography. Mm-hmm. That went over really well business-wise, but it also presented an issue in our marriage because we were getting to know each other. Obviously, transitioning from living separately to living together presented its own challenges, but then adding a business on top of it with the struggling communication made it even like worse, more difficult. Yeah, made it extremely more worse. So we would have business meetings about what to do and how things were going. They would literally last for 5 minutes before it turned into an argument.
Totally.
We had differing expectations, management, boundaries, like all of those things. But we finally figured out like, okay, let's come to a common ground on what we want for our future, how we grew up. Do we want our current lives to continue to look that way? Or do we want to forge a new life? Do we want to be entrepreneurs? Do we want to work our whole entire lives, for $1 in a retirement and hopefully Social Security? Like, what are we doing here and where are we trying to go?
Right.
That, I think, that emphasis and the focus and the goal and praying towards that helped us to come together and really focus on what are your strengths, what are my strengths, right? Mm-hmm. Let's stay in our separate lanes. Sometimes when couples get together and they start a business, it's like a overlapping, muddying the water situation, because you're looking at that other person's work or their input towards the business, and you're critiquing it because you feel like, oh, well, I could do that better. Oh, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And all of those things. And so then now you end up stepping on each other's feet and not really getting anywhere, and the business suffers, which was what was happening to us. But once we decided, like, listen, you're good at videography and editing, I'm good at these things. Let's stay in our respective roles, right? Our lane. Let's stay on our lane. I'm good in my lane. You're good in your lane. So we should be, rolling good at this point. Once we determined that, things like started improving for sure.
For sure.
What was that? Was it 2 years? 2 years later?
Yeah, about 2 years.
2 years later, we're like, we have the big eyes at this point. We're watching all of the reality shows. We're like, yes, we're going to change our life, pay off all of our student loans. I'm going to shop when I want to, like Forever 21, here I come. All these things, right? Don't forget, I was like 23, I think, right. 24 at the time.
21 was popping.
Yeah, it was like a big deal back then. So I'm like, I'm going to go in there and buy all this stuff. We're going to get all this extra money. Mind you, I'm still a probation officer. He's still a hotel manager, but that wasn't enough at the time. So we're like, let's really level up, because everybody, you get a taste of a little bit and you just want the whole enchilada. So we're like, let's level up and go buy a franchise. We did all of this research and took some money that we had saved up, and we went and bought a popular smoothie franchise out here. I had already, when you get your tax return, you like spend the whole check before you get it. You're just like, I know exactly what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to pay off this bill, that bill, this bill, all of these things, and then tithe and put a little in savings, etc. That's how we had kind of like calculated our success that we thought we were going to get from the smoothie franchise. Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, we had the business for like 4 years, right? 6 months into buying it.
It's important to note, we bought the business, I think in 2007?
Yes.
2007, which, as you all know, was going into the Great Recession, right? Yeah. One of the worst economic periods of our lifetime.
And who wants to buy a seasonal smoothie when you are getting foreclosed in your house, you're getting laid off, and you can barely afford like something to eat? Nobody's showing up at your establishment to get a $7 smoothie at that point. Did we know that? No. Right? As a matter of fact, our accountant prior to that was like, I wouldn't touch this business with a 10-foot pole. And we were thinking, well, what does he know?
Unbridled ambition.
Unbridled
for
ambition.
some early 20-year-olds.
Unbridled
just
ambition.
Trying to get it.
Exactly. Yeah. We jumped in like both feet in head first, and we asked God to bless it after the fact. And that's not really how God works. Anyway, so 6 months into the business, after doing all of this and making a little money from videography, we sat down. I remember exactly where we were on the couch at our old house, and we were just like, is it me? or does the business not make any money?
I think I said this business ain't gonna make no money. I think it was a declaration, unfortunately.
It was a harsh reality, which
yeah.
I was like in denial originally, but slowly but surely, very quickly, it realized like, wait, I think we've been bamboozled. Okay, so 4 years into this, right? 4 years of just making it work, working our full-time jobs, driving here. We live like an hour away from the establishment, carpooling, having a meeting place, like going after our jobs to the shop, to work till like 10 p.m., to drive all the way home, to get Del Taco every night for 4 entire years. The plus of this, right? For anybody contemplating business, Howard always be like, what is it? Don't let the ship sink.
Yeah, you can't let the ship sink. You know, I always encourage, especially men, and when you start something, you know, understand it's going to have consequences, repercussions. With this period, Daniel, that 4 years, we call it adversity university. We signed up for we had
a master's degree in it.
University. But the reality of when you go through adversity, you can't throw in the towel, you know, right? You know, the prize is given to he who endures to the end, right?
That's right.
And so, or he who attempts to obtain that prize that the Bible talks about. And so we had to understand, like, okay, this is bad. Like we took it on. It was not pretty. It was not glamorous. The outside world thought that we were this young, successful couple because people look at the facade, right? So people just see they have a house at a young age. They're in their 20s. They have a business. They're in career. While Danielle and I financially are fighting for our lives. And again, top 3 reasons for divorce. One of them is finance. So here we are 2 years into marriage, financially fighting for our lives. It was complete adversity, but we did not let the ship sink.
Right.
We also were very responsible. One of the things about marriage is you have to make some good choices, right? You can make some bad choices. Okay, but you got to make some good choices. So we knew as newlyweds, we weren't going to bring kids into this situation, right? And so that took another level of discipline to make sure that we were taking proper precautionary measures to not bring a child into this situation. We couldn't even have a puppy. Literally, we had to give the puppy away because we couldn't afford to even have a puppy during the season. And sometimes
no time.
People, you know, when you're going through adversity, we make choices just because we want it that make the muck and mire even worse, right? And children are a blessing, but oftentimes children are punished because we don't have any self-control or discipline. So though we made a bad choice with this business, that really I don't call a bad choice. In marriage, you're going to have seasons. God's going to take you through things so you can learn, so that you can grow. Even though to us, boot camp seems like a bad choice, to God, boot camp is what's preparing you to be a great soldier for him in whatever area he's called you to in the future. But yeah, you know, it was an interesting time, 4 years.
But I wanted to mention to the couples that are contemplating a business, do not quit your day job. And that was the responsible part that Howard is talking about. We kept our day job. Had we not kept our day job, we probably would have lost both of our houses, our cars, and everything that we had worked hard to establish. During those 4 years, our job is what allowed us to be able to sustain the business. Like we'd make the money, pay our at-home bills, and then all the rest of our check and savings would go to paying our 13 employees and keeping the doors open because of fear of like, what is everybody going to say?
That's
We're going to look like failures.
That's a great lesson to also commercial break into what Daniel's saying, because one of the things that we learn now is you don't hold on to something out of fear of what people think.
That's right.
So at that, we were young 20s, you guys. So we still had these things that we cared about at 24, 25, what people thought about us if we let the doors close. So here we are struggling with a business that we knew wasn't going to work. And I knew it wasn't going to work, right? I felt it. I knew it. It was nothing about that business that was going to work. But because of trying to look a certain way and not look a certain way, rather not look like failures, not look like an unsuccessful couple, we held on to something that we should have let go. And it wouldn't have prolonged that 4 years of adversity. We should have just, you know, gracefully walked away from the business. But Danielle's right. You know, we did keep our jobs. And that definitely helped us survive 4 years.
Absolutely. So we were so burnt so bad from that business. We're like, that's okay. I know we said earlier we don't want to work our whole lives at 9 to 5, but we've decided it's just easier. And
We would prefer.
We prefer it. We have excellent jobs. So, and there's no risk there, right? It's what you tell yourself. People can hire you and fire you today and tomorrow. But to us at the time, we were just like, it's okay. Let's just stick with what's stable. So that kept us quiet basically for a couple more years. And then we decided like, we start getting the bug again. Maybe not. Maybe. I think after that was, do you remember what came after that?
Well, I would say this, to fast forward, not go through every single one.
Okay.
Right. Is we went from that Juice It Up franchise to a myriad of businesses post that. We got into retail through apparel. We ended up opening a vocational school for hospitality and restaurant management. But we learned from that season how to navigate these other seasons. So though we were jaded, we were able to pick ourselves up, because one of the things that's important to note, if you don't hear it at this point, is Danielle and I were extremely entrepreneurial. That was like a common interest. It was, even to this day, a part of our purpose for being married, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And so we went on to start a lot of businesses. And I think all of the seasons of starting businesses got progressively better because we would learn from the first.
And because we started to, the most successful, I would say, we went on a fast and asked God what he wanted us to do. We didn't want to pursue what we thought was going to make money, looking over here at this person, looking at this person. Oh, they're doing that. It looks easy. Let me try that. Let me try this.
Right.
When we stopped, stay in your lane. Like, stay in your gifts and your talents. You know what that is. It doesn't matter if somebody else made $1 million overnight. It's not going to work for you, because that's not what God's called you to do. Right. But, you're just like pushing a rock uphill. Nevertheless, once we stopped and prayed and asked God what to do, and God revealed it to us, which was talking about our marriage and helping other people in their marriage, which we have been doing our whole entire marriage, but it was never like officially a thing until we stopped and prayed about it. Then that's when like things went super easy, like doors open like never before. God's favor and opportunity like was coming left and right. We were getting along. We were passionate. We pretty much get along, but we're passionate about what we were talking about and doing. So we're staying up late, just trying to make this thing work, because that's what God had called us to do together. Amen. Right? Sometimes people pursue businesses separately and they're like, oh, that's my business. This is your business or whatever. But when you can do something together, or even lend your expertise to each other, it's just a more harmonious and peaceful situation than feeling like, oh, mine's versus yours and yours versus mine, when really it's both of you guys'. When we had the online clothing store, it was a women's clothing store. Howard doesn't wear women's clothes. No, I do not. He doesn't care about, what's hot and what's not. However, he is very well at managing finances and percentages and investment and rate of return and whatever, a return on investment. And so that was him lending his right. That was his role. He was a silent investor in the business, but his role was to help me like narrow down the numbers and cents and what was going to work and not work. And so knowing what you're called to do, what your gifts and talents are, and being able to marry them together really helps marriages, I think, stay together peacefully. And
not compete too, So what Danielle was talking about with that female apparel store, it's like we could have allowed that to be, and this is what happens. This is why businesses sometimes tear marriages up, because it's one person's thing, right? It's like, well, that's your thing, and I'm over here, I'm doing my thing. And so what happens is you lose time that you could be spending together, right? You lose quality time focusing on the we thing. Danielle talked about it briefly. We don't use me in anything, not even in her job or my job. When we get a paycheck, that's our paycheck. Right. And marriage, the Bible says that you cleave, you become one flesh, right? And so everything is ours. We try not to use the my, me, this, that, and the other, right? It's we. But what was so important about that is because we were intentional about learning to make it us, it allowed us to have quality time together. It also allowed the entity to be both our responsibilities. What we learned with that first smoothie franchise is not to point the finger at blame. Right. So marriages implode when you say, well, you made this decision and this was your decision and you thought this would be good and smart. No, in the maturity of marriage, you don't proceed past go, right? If you're playing Monopoly until you guys are on one accord. I know there's temptation for maybe a husband or wife to say, well, a husband may say, well, you got to submit to me. I think this is best for the family. Or the wife may say, well, this is what I'm called to do. It's my purpose. You hold me back. Listen, God's not the author of confusion. Yeah. We've learned, and just the word to the wise is sufficient. if you're not on one accord with your husband or wife, just wait.
Yeah.
Just wait it out to your own one accord. And so that it can be a we thing and you can't blame each other and then support each other. And as a practical tool, we both had a corporate background. We call that our organizational chart. When Danielle said, okay, well, she was maybe the CEO on the organizational chart of the women's business, but maybe I was the CFO, the chief financial officer of that business. We both had a role to play on the organizational chart. And this is important for entrepreneurial type couples because if I have a role to play, I'm vested. If she has a role to play, she's vested. No matter whose gifts and talents are playing a different role, we're both vested. And in everything that you do in marriage, you're always both owners. Right. So even if you don't have a role to play on the organizational chart, you need to consider yourself a silent investor owner who's going to pray for your husband or wife because you're still a shareholder and you're a stakeholder in that business. So that's critical for surviving business and marriage, which most people recommend to not do because people don't have a corporate background and understand that there has to be structure so that you can protect the marriage entity by having structure in this business. You know, talking about all the business stuff, talking about our dating to engage, to marry, and getting our business, we eventually found our niche. We found our purpose for marriage.
Yes.
And having that purpose for marriage really allowed our marriage to be popping. At that point, we started to catch our groove. And this was in 2016, 17, where after being married for 11 years, we eventually found our groove because now we're not trying to scratch at anything. Right. Now we're just getting to enjoy something that we prayed about, that we knew God destined us to do together in Marriage on Deck. And so that just freed us up to just be able to become best friends, you know, go at the pace of grace, stop trying to hustle. Sometimes we think hustle's so good, but it's nice. There's good. There's some good to it, but we learn to rely on God and go at the pace of grace. And I was able to just really start dating my wife again and courting Danielle again. And at this point we started planning, we had a child.
Yes.
And really began to start falling in love. And purpose is so critical to that because, you know, you're not trying to scratch and do all these crazy things.
See you next time on the next episode of Love and Lifestyle. Come back to my channel.